LPG crisis. How cooking gas travels 2,500 kilometers to reach India and why it is brought in liquid form. It is night. The cylinder kept in the kitchen at home is almost empty. The flame on the stove grows stronger at times, then weaker. The phone is picked up and a refill is booked, but the screen shows only one message. Your refill is delayed. Outside on the road, people are standing in line, arguments are happening outside the agency, and there is only one question in everyone's mind. Is it really true that the fire in our kitchen, the food in our home, and our everyday life depend on a sea route that lies thousands of kilometers away from India? That is where the fear begins. And the curiosity is, how does that gas, which we so casually call a cylinder and then forget about, actually reach India? The truth is that LPG is not just a domestic fuel, but the final end of a huge chain of geopolitics, shipping, refining, storage, and logistics. India is among the world's largest consumers of LPG. According to recent government and Reuters reports, India consumed about 33 million metric tons of cooking gas last year, of which nearly 60% of the demand was met through imports. The government has also said that around 90% of these LPG imports come through the Strait of Hormuz, which means that if tensions rise in West Asia, the impact can reach directly into Indian kitchens. That is why whenever tensions rise in West Asia or danger appears on shipping lanes, panic is seen not only in financial markets in India, but also in the lines outside gas agencies. In the last few days, booking requests rose from about 5.5 million per day to 7.6 million per day. That means it is not just shortage, but also fear-driven demand. People want to secure a second cylinder before the first one runs out, because they begin to feel that tomorrow may become too late. Now the question is, what exactly is LPG? The full form of LPG is liquefied petroleum gas. It is mainly a mixture of hydrocarbons like propane and butane. At normal temperature, it remains in gas form, but under moderate pressure or cooler conditions, it can be turned into liquid. That is its biggest logistical advantage. Transporting it in gas form would be difficult, expensive, and inefficient, whereas in liquid form, the same fuel takes up far less space and becomes easier to handle in large quantities inside ships, storage tanks, and cylinders. That is exactly why LPG is sent in liquefied form. In other words, the gas that finally becomes a flame in your kitchen actually completes its long journey in liquid form. First, it is separated during crude oil refining or natural gas processing. Then, at export terminals, it is handled in special refrigerated or pressurized systems. After that, it is filled into specially designed gas carriers, which are not like ordinary cargo ships. The design of these ships itself is such that the pressure, temperature, and boil-off of the cargo tank can be controlled. The International Maritime Organization's IGC code and gas carrier safety standards exist exactly for this purpose, so that flammability, pressure risk, toxicity, and low-temperature hazards can be controlled. One very interesting thing needs to be understood here. When we say that the distance between India and Qatar is around 2,500 kilometers, that is not just the distance visible on a map. The real story is about that sea corridor through which ships leave the Persian Gulf, then cross the Strait of Hormuz, then enter the Arabian Sea, and after that move toward the western or southern coast of India. In normal times, this route is considered one of the energy arteries of the world. According to the US EIA, the Strait of Hormuz is among the most important energy choke points in the world, and in 2024, a very large share of crude and LNG passing through it reached Asia. That is why countries like India, China, Japan, and South Korea take any disruption in this narrow passage extremely seriously. India's historical dependence tells the same story. According to recent Reuters reports, around 90% of India's LPG imports have continued to come from the Middle East. Countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait have long remained India's major suppliers. A Reuters report from 2025 also said that India sourced nearly 90% of its term imports from these Gulf suppliers. This means that the security of our cooking gas is not just a price issue, but also a question of source concentration. When supplier geography becomes too limited, the possibility of disruption turns into a supply shock. Now imagine that ship which is coming to India carrying LPG. It is not an ordinary tanker. In gas carriers, pressure and temperature management inside the cargo tanks are extremely critical. Some systems manage boil-off vapor, some maintain tank pressure, and throughout the voyage, the stability of the cargo is continuously monitored. That is why LPG shipping is a highly specialized maritime business. It would be a mistake to understand it simply as gas was sent. In reality, it is floating chemical engineering taking place in the middle of the sea. The question of why accidents remain rare is also very important. The answer is layers of safety. According to industry guidance, processes like inerting and nitrogen are used in liquefied gas carriers so that the risk of flammable mixtures forming remains low. Oxygen is reduced inside the cargo tanks and surrounding spaces to reduce explosion risk. Along with that, fire protection, Gas detection, emergency shutdown systems, and strict operating procedures are implemented on ships and terminals. So yes, LPG is dangerous, but it is not uncontrolled. The science of working with it has been refined over decades. After reaching India, the story does not end. In fact, a new chain begins from there. Imported LPG is first unloaded at coastal terminals or import facilities. In India's LPG infrastructure, import locations, refineries, fractionators, and bottling plants all have their own role. According to PPAC's LPG profile, as of the 1st of January 2024, around 42% of the country's total LPG tankage was at import locations, 38% at bottling plants, 17% at refineries, and 3% at fractionators. This means that import terminals are not just entry gates, but also a major part of the national supply buffer. After unloading LPG from the ship at a terminal, it is stored in storage tanks, bullets, pipelines, or caverns. Facilities like Mangalore are counted among the country's major import hubs. In an official presentation from 2023, HPCL's Mangalore LPG import facility was described as the country's largest LPG import facility, capable of handling around 3 MMTPA. In Visakhapatnam, South Asia LPG Company's underground cavern storage is also strategically important. In this way, ports do not function merely as unloading points, but as pressure valves for supply continuity. After that, LPG in bulk form goes to bottling plants through rail tankers, road tankers, or pipelines. A bottling plant is the place where this huge international cargo becomes a domestic cylinder for the first time. That is where filling into 14.2 kilograms domestic cylinders or commercial cylinders happens, leak tests are carried out, safety seals are applied, dispatch planning is done, and then supply is sent through trucks to the distributor network. According to PPAC data, as of the 1st of January 2024, PSU OMCs had around 32 crore active domestic LPG customers and 25,449 distributors. Just think into how many tiny layers of logistics the cargo of one ship finally breaks down before reaching crores of homes. That is exactly why wherever disruption happens, source country, shipping lane, port congestion, storage limit, bottling delay, trucking bottleneck, or panic booking, the effect finally appears on cylinder delivery. And because LPG demand is also affected by season, festivals, weather, and household behavior, the crisis is never as simple as just imports stopped. Sometimes arrivals are delayed, sometimes berths are not available, sometimes trucking capacity comes under pressure, and sometimes people's fear adds extra load to the system. That is why the government recently took steps like giving priority berthing to LPG carriers at ports, asking refiners to increase output, and diverting domestic supply more toward household use. Now, one more important point. Many people think that if India produces 40% of its LPG and imports the rest, then why is the problem so serious? The reason is time sensitivity. It is not easy to store LPG in massive quantities for a very long time, the way strategic petroleum reserves are stored. Available reporting shows that India's LPG storage cover is limited, and import locations and tankage are extremely important. PPAC's 2024 profile said that all India overall tankage cover was around 15 days. That means if a shipping disruption becomes prolonged, pressure comes onto the system very quickly. During the recent crisis, India did not just wait, it also responded. According to PIB and Reuters, refineries were instructed to maximize LPG yields. Domestic production was increased by around 30% after the 5th of March. Restraints were placed on commercial users, and efforts were also made toward alternate import sources like the US, Norway, Canada, and Russia. The oil minister said that efforts are being made to reduce Gulf dependency. The meaning is clear. India no longer wants to continue depending only on the West Asia route. But this diversification is not an overnight solution. That is because shipping contracts, port compatibility, freight cost, cargo economics, and refining configuration do not change instantly. The distance from the Middle East to India is comparatively shorter. Freight patterns are already established, and long-term contracts already exist. It is possible to bring LPG from the US or the Atlantic Basin, but that introduces different types of pressure in voyage time, freight, and supply scheduling. So diversification is an insurance policy, not an instant replacement. The most human side of this whole crisis is that the real meaning of energy security is understood only when lighting the stove at home becomes difficult. News of crude oil prices rising appears in headlines, but the pain of LPG delay is felt in the kitchen. For a family, a cylinder is not just fuel. It is morning tea, children's meals, khichdi made for an elder's medicine, and part of everyday dignity. That is why when geopolitical conflict happens 2,500 kilometers away, its impact can be deeper than breaking news. It enters directly into the Indian kitchen. And perhaps that is the biggest lesson of this story. LPG is not an ordinary commodity, but an invisible national lifeline. It passes from wellhead to refinery, from refinery to terminal, from terminal to tanker, from tanker through Hormuz, from Hormuz to the Arabian Sea, then to an Indian port, storage, bottling plant, truck, and distributor, before finally reaching your kitchen. When we light the stove, we are not just lighting a burner. In it, An entire system of global trade, marine engineering, diplomacy, strategic planning, and logistics is working. And that is exactly why LPG arriving in liquid form is not just a technical detail. It is the backbone of the whole system. Today, as India struggles with this crisis, the biggest question is not only when the next cylinder will arrive. The real question is whether, in the coming years, India will be able to strengthen its LPG supply chain enough that the kitchens of crores of homes will not become vulnerable because of one strait, one region, or one war. Because the truth is, an energy crisis does not always begin in a refinery. Many times it quietly appears in the kitchen. And when the fire in the kitchen becomes tied to geopolitics, then every cylinder stops being just gas and becomes a symbol of national security.
If our video has taught you something new, do not forget to like and share this video so that this information can reach others as well. Your likes and shares are a source of inspiration for us. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let us know in the comments. It will be our honor to answer your questions and listen to suggestion. And yes, if you like our content, subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so that you stay connected with every new story. Thank you. GRT Business YouTube channel sources news from various news agencies, opinion polls, and other public sources. We try to ensure that every report and summary is accurate and verified, but we are not responsible for any dispute or error. Our aim is only to provide you with accurate information.